Welcome to learning about shark attacks. Not against humans though, but rather how sharks feed. This is Rosie. She's a nurse shark, and she'll be showing you how they imitate a walking-like feeding behavior in the water and outside the water. So, we just watched the video on the walking behavior of nurse sharks, but why do we call it walking and not something else? Well, beneath the waves published a paper, and it's actually called pectoral positioning. So, let's go to the ground to see how it works. So, how the pectoral positioning works is the nurse shark gets themselves close to the ground, practically laying on it, when they take their pectoral fins and they prop themselves up like so. This is because they have a suction feeding behavior where they get themselves close to the prey and suction up the food into their mouth. But I said they do this on both sea and on land. So how do they do this on land? Not quite like that, but rather the same way that pectoral positioning works underwater, it works out of water. Say there's a boat ramp of some sort that the nurse shark wants to get up on. They'll simply use their pectoral fins to help themselves up onto that ramp, and if they need to, push themselves up into a higher position. Though that might not be needed because this hunting position underwater is more used for places like coral reefs to get small little sea urchins or stingrays or even small fish outside of the reefs that are hiding away from them. They use this suctioning, that's why they have a suction feeding type, so when they get up to that area in the reef, they can boom, get the food right in their mouth. But why is any of this important? Why should we know how sharks feed, or specifically how nurse sharks feed? Well, nurse sharks, compared to their other shark counterparts, have a thing called buccal pumping, which means in order to breathe, they don't have to continue moving around. Whereas, say, a tiger shark like this would have to continuously move in order to pump air through its lungs.
That was my bad. They don't pump air through their lungs. It's through their gills.
Same with a blacktip reef shark. But still, that doesn't really fully encompass why this is such an important feeding behavior. With ever-rising ocean waters, that means that sharks may be changing their feeding behaviors. For nurse sharks, this may be them going up onto land in order to get more food. So, oceans are rising, the coral reefs are dying. Nurse sharks mostly live in coral reefs and hunt in coral reefs. That's where they reside. But with that lack of food and without that area to stay, they have to go somewhere else. We already see behaviors like this with certain sharks, where they beach
This
themselves
is the uplet shark,
and they
and
get
by
flopping
slowing
fish that also
down
beach
their
themselves due
breathing
to
and by
how
shutting
low
out
their
part of their brain,
tides
they
are.
could stay on the land for about an hour.
Back to nurse sharks though. This feeding behavior is still relatively new, as of 2020 when the Beneath the Waves research paper came out. So we don't really know too much about how they feed or why they're feeding like this. All we know is that their feeding behaviors are a little bit different compared to other sharks. Pectoral positioning is only one of many types of feeding behaviors that they show. One of them even going upside down in order to feed. Kind of silly, really funny though. But that also means that they're changing up their hunting ways in order to get more food or as much food as they possibly can, because these feeding behaviors were seen in ways for the nurse shark to get as much food as they possibly can. So all in all, while this topic is a tiny bit silly, it all comes down to evolution and rising ocean temperatures, which is changing how these sharks are feeding and how they're going about their ways of life. They're adapting to our new environment that we are causing from other sources like pollution and everything. So that was my BioBits video about the walking like feeding behavior of nurse sharks. I hope in the end you learned at least something from this video, even if it was that nurse sharks exist or just how their feeding behavior is changing. Yeah, live, love, love nurse sharks.